Hello everyone. I hope that you are enjoying this alternative to coming into class today and will find that this is a useful way to spend your time, because today we're going to start talking about assignment number 4, the technical definition and description. And in this screencast, I want to do two things. First, I want to walk you through assignment number 4 step by step, just like we do in class. I'll elaborate on some points and hopefully leave you feeling fairly sure about what this assignment is about, and you'll have time on Thursday to ask questions. Secondly, I have some homework that I'd like you to complete for Thursday's class, and I'll be talking about that at the end of this screencast. So before we start talking about assignment 4, I should just point out that you'll find this entire assignment sheet on Angel in the Unit 4 folder, so you can pull up that document and take notes if you'd like, or follow along. I'll be actually using parts of the document for this screencast, just as you see here right now. So let's start talking about assignment number 4, which should be a pretty enjoyable one for you, because this is a kind of standard type of writing in technical communication, something that you might find on a future job as a requirement. And for this particular assignment, you'll be able to choose to talk about and write about something of your own selection, so that should be enjoyable as well. So here to get started, we can see that this assignment sheet starts by saying that technical professionals are often required to define or describe a technical object, concept, or process to someone who has little knowledge or experience with the subject at hand. For example, an engineering firm might write a proposal to bid on a contract to develop a helicopter for the Defense Department. One section of that proposal would be a detailed description of the product the company proposes to develop. Technical descriptions are used before products and processes are developed as part of the proposal and planning document process, during development in progress reports, for instance, and afterwards as part of marketing and promotional literature and technical support documents. So this assignment asks you to select a product or a process and write a description of it. Now, when you're thinking about what you might like to write about, it's a good idea to select something with which you are already familiar, so that you can focus on learning how to write the description rather than focusing on both learning how to write the description and learning about that product or process. So, there are two different kinds of technical descriptions to consider: the product description and the process description, and we'll talk about that more in just a moment. But you need to choose whichever one is appropriate depending on this topic that you choose. And here I'd like to just pause and say that really, your first step is to select what you're going to describe, and that's one of the things that you'll be working on for Thursday. So take seriously this suggestion here to choose something that is fairly familiar with to you at this point, even if in the process of writing the description you'll be looking at it in a different way, or maybe looking at it more carefully than you have before. But you don't want to double your work. You don't want to choose something that you have no knowledge of right now, and that you have to learn about the product or the process and then write about it in a way that shows your expertise. So you can even choose a process that, for example, seems like second nature to you now, but that does have explanatory power, like registering for classes at Penn State. That's a process that probably comes pretty naturally for you at this point, but it is a process that you had to kind of learn when you first used it, and there are probably some ways to describe that process that would be new to you, that you would learn about in the process of writing this description, but generally you're kind of familiar with the process. So that would be an example of something that might be good. This is a nice time to think locally about things that you encounter or processes that you do in your everyday life. Okay, so as I said before, you have two choices here. You can choose a product description or a process description. So let's first talk about this product description. A product description explains the features of a specific device. like a scientific instrument or a computer program. So you're actually focusing on a thing, not a process. So possible topics here might include devices that are specific to your field or a device that you use in everyday life. And as you read chapter 20 for Markel for homework for the next class, you'll see that Markel describes this in terms of object or mechanism. So here are some examples of some things around you. These would probably fall more in the mechanism definition that Markel provides, but some examples here of what you might think about in terms of a product description. So our second type of description is a process description, which explains how an event occurs, something that has some complexity to it, a mechanical process or a natural event. So again, you can choose a process that's specific to your field or one that you find that people might just be curious about. And again, here are some good examples of things that you might consider in terms of process to get your thinking started about what your choices might be. So here I'll just pause and say, for both product and process, what you'll need to think about is the granularity of your category. And what I mean by that is the particular product or the process that you're thinking about too big or too small, or hopefully just right for a good descriptive paper. So if you're kind of interested in cell phones, something that's definitely too big is categorizing your object as a communication device. That's kind of a broad category that would be too difficult for this project. And you might find that cell phone in and of itself is too broad and too large of a category. So you might want to scale down and think about a particular iPhone app or some feature of a cell phone that you want to describe, or the process of using that feature, for example. So that's really what you're going to need to think about as you're deciding on a topic for this assignment. Getting a good scope that will be a good fit for this particular assignment. And here I also want to refer you to chapter 20, which you'll be starting to read for tonight. You'll read the first half of the chapter. And in this chapter, Markel really does a nice job of distinguishing definition from description and setting those two apart from instructions. And that's going to be really important for you to keep in mind for this whole unit, is that you're not writing instructions for how to use something, you're using definition and description. So just want to make sure that you're reading that half of the chapter carefully and seeing how definition and description are a different way of writing and doing different things than instruction. So you'll see here that in this assignment sheet, I've taken care to further distinguish this difference between instructions and an instruction set versus a product or process description. And I would say that this is the area where you can get into a little trouble in this assignment, because you need to make sure that your description doesn't turn into an instruction set. So remember, instruction sets, even though you might not be familiar with them as a genre yet, they provide steps a user would take in order to complete a task. They would be like a step-by-step instructional guide. But what you need to do for this project is create a product or process description that describes how something works. So for example, how does oil function to cool an engine, not how do you go about changing oil in a car. Okay, so this is a point-by-point description of the process that's happening or the product that you're describing. Okay, now you have a general overview of the entire paper, and we'll start to really focus on some of the rhetorical choices that you'll need to make and the logistics of this assignment. So first, we know that audience and purpose are two of the rhetorical principles we need to think about. Attention to audience and purpose, that is. So you're going to need to select an audience that would be interested in learning about the process or the product that you explain. So like we have said in every assignment up to this point, there kind of has to be some specific rationale for why you're writing this. Have a particular audience in mind. So, one hypothetical audience could be students reading about your topic in a textbook. You could also write a marketing document to persuade people to buy a particular product, or you could write a description that would be part of a proposal being sent out to a potential client. So in the assignment, you should assume that the description is crucial to the work or the interest of your audience. You want to have an invested audience in mind. As you start working on drafting and doing some invention for this writing project, this is after you get some feedback on your topic being appropriate, you'll want to definitely gather some information about the particular product or process that you select. So even though I'm encouraging you to write about something that you're fairly familiar with, you're probably going to have to read some background information or otherwise inform yourself about this topic. If you're using a process online or something that you're very familiar with, just the fact that you're describing it for an audience that doesn't know how the product or process works, you're probably going to have to refamiliarize yourself or look at that product or process in a slightly different way in order to write this well. You might have to do some additional research for information that you're not sure about. So as you think about writing up this particular document, you're going to want to focus on a few conventional moves to make sure that your description is complete. So for the product description, if that's what you're doing, you'll probably start with a sentence definition of the product and its various parts. Now, Markel talks about the difference between a sentence definition and an extended definition, so you'll read about that in chapter 20, but you might realize that you need to do more of an extended definition if your audience needs more of this introductory information. So that's going to be your rhetorical choice. How much or how little are you defining this product? But you absolutely need a definition somewhere at the, kind of toward the beginning of this description. Then you'll move from definition to description, describing each part of the product in more detail, including its dimensions, its material, function, and relation to other parts. So what you're going to do as you kind of wrap up the description is you're going to return to a discussion of the product in its entirety. In other words, you're going to zoom back out again and describe the product as a whole. So this is important here because sometimes students start off with a definition, they write about their particular product and do so in a piecemeal fashion, so they're talking about specific parts, and then they kind of just stop. So you really need to have that nice content balance where you're starting talking about the entire product, you focus in on the details and the parts and whatever you want to describe, and then you come back out for a nice conclusion. You'll do much the same for a process description, so I won't go into detail here. Start with a definition, use the description to describe each step of the process in detail, and then conclude with a summary of a complete cycle in the process. Okay, and here's some more information about the specific formatting that I'm looking for. We're going to pull in features of designing a technical document, and I want to be able to see that you're using those effectively in this assignment, and your final paper should be at least 1,000 words single-spaced. One difference in this assignment that we haven't seen in the other assignments is that you're going to have a requirement to include one visual, at least one visual, in your final assignment. So you have two options here. You can develop your own visual, or you might use a reference visual that you find that's a published image somewhere. If you do use that reference visual, you absolutely need to cite the source from which you glean this particular image. That's really important. Finally, here's a short checklist of the requirements for the assignment and some resources in Chapter 20 of Markel. These particular figures are going to serve as your sample documents for this unit. Okay, I hope this gives you a good overview of our next assignment, and now let's move on to the second link I sent you so we can talk about the homework for Thursday.